All right, welcome to Wednesday Night Conversations, where we are addressing relevant topics, topics that hopefully help you from a biblical perspective. And last week we started kind of what we're going to do, a series of conversations on the topic of hope. And in the world that we're living in today, the chaos, all the things with the coronavirus, with social injustice, all these different things that are going on around us, it's so important that we as Christians, we as the body of Christ, that even the world needs to see hope and needs hope ministered to them in so many areas. The Bible actually says that faith is the substance of things hoped for. And so faith gives substance to hope. If we don't have hope, faith actually has nothing to give substance to. And so it's so important that we have hope in every single area of our lives. Last week, we talked about health and hope. And this week, we are going to be talking about family and about marriages and having hope for our family and for our marriages. And so we have two very special guests with us. My friends Mike and Pam Calvert, and we actually met last year. I was teaching a marriage class with my wife, and I remember the first week. That's the very first week is what I recall when I thought of you guys. We went around the class, just like most marriage classes do that first week, and we asked some questions just to break some ice. And I think you guys were like one of the last couples there. But one of those questions was how long you had been married. And I've done a lot of marriage classes, and I've been in a lot of marriage classes, and I hadn't thought I heard it all before until you guys answered that question that week. Why don't you guys kind of let them in on our secret here and let them know kind of how you answered that question that week, how long you'd actually been married?
Well, our answer is usually, which time are you talking about?
Right, I think that's what it was that week too, actually. And so, explain that to us, Mike.
Well, we were married the first time for almost 14 years, and we had some chug holes and struggles in our life, and we divorced for almost 10 years. And then through a series of miracles, we were able to get back together and remarried, and so now we've been remarried again for several years.
That's the first time. I'm sure it's probably happened somewhere out there, but it was the first time I had ever met a couple that have done that before. And the reason I wanted to have them on this week, actually, in regards to hope, and actually what I think about when I think about y'all's marriage, I was thinking about this week, is Lazarus. And I just think about how people talk about healing for marriage and healing for people's hearts, and all that's true and necessary. But you guys are like Lazarus. Jesus didn't show up to heal him. Jesus showed up and resurrected Lazarus. Y'all's marriage was literally resurrected. And I think just that offers so much hope for people, that, marriage is not easy, right? Marriage just is not easy. It's hard work. At least it should be hard work if you're going to have a successful marriage. And so why don't we go back? Let's go back to the beginning. Y'all's first marriage, when you first got married. How old were you? How'd you meet, and kind of how'd that first few months of marriage look?
Okay. You want to do it?
No, go ahead.
Okay, we were childhood sweethearts, and we actually attended the same church in our teenage years. We actually attended the same high school for a short period of time, but we were childhood sweethearts, and we dated when we were allowed to call it dating. We weren't allowed to call it dating when we were young, but actually I think Pam was about 12 years old when we first met, and I was 14, and we just kind of hit it off, liked each other as friends, continued that friendship until we were allowed to start dating, and then we continued that dating on until we got married. Through a series of events, we actually, after I graduated from high school, I moved to Florida with my brother and started pioneering a ministry with him. At the same time, her parents moved to the same city, And coincidentally, they actually moved to an area that was only just a few blocks from where I was living with my brother. So we were able and thrilled to death to continue on our dating relationship. And we got married in Florida. Pam was 17, I was 19. We did marry early, but we had been together for 5 years as far as friendships and dating. And so we had a chance there to have really known each other and just continued right on into the ministry, working there at the Christian school and church with my brother.
Wow. So you get married, and you're living in Florida, or did you guys?
Yeah, when we married in Florida, and we stayed there for 3 years.
For 3 years, and then you came back here to Indiana.
Correct.
Okay. And those first few years of marriage, everything was good. What was going on those first few years of marriage?
Yeah, it was just a normal marriage. We had, in that time, we had our daughter. And then I think we were there another year and a half. Mike was working in the school, and I was student teaching. And we had our daughter, and she was a year and a half old when I got homesick. So he moved me back to Indiana.
Good husband. And so you're happily married. You're living here in Indiana. So what happened? What started to kind of that led to you guys eventually getting divorced? What events led up to that?
Well, life was good. We typically tell people that we had the traditional American dream marriage. I mean, we actually purchased a small house and some acreage. We had some farm animals, and our children lived there on that little small farm, and it was just a happy life. And through those early years of marriage, we just got into the rat race of life, as you might say, working and coming home, and the same thing over and over, and going to church. And I was working in some different ministries in the church, music ministry and youth ministry. And through all of that, I began to let down on my prayer life and my Bible reading. We still attended church regularly, but through that, I began to just let down my guard on the attacks that Satan is so good, so sly about bringing on. And sometimes it comes on unnoticed.
It's very sneaky.
Yes. And so that's what happened. And so during that time of my slacking of prayer life, I began to relate to some other people that were laughing at my jokes. And I'm a jokester, and I like to pull pranks on people and have fun, make people laugh. And so during that time, Pam came to me and told me that she said, I think you're making some people laugh, and you're being around too many of my girlfriends, and you're enjoying that too much. And that didn't sit well with me, because I had an audience out there that laughed at my jokes.
Right.
And, Pam didn't laugh at my jokes anymore because she had heard them all. And so when I would tell my jokes or pull a prank, it wasn't funny to her, but other people began to laugh. And a lot of these people were some of her girlfriends. And so I was attracting the attention, and they were attracting my attention. Mm-hmm. And she tried to warn me about that. And so as that happened,
would you say you were in denial at that point, as far as as far as them attracting you, as far as them pulling on your heart?
I was, because I thought I was just being a good old guy, and but you see, Satan had a plan. He had a plan for destruction. And as this was happening, unbeknownst to me, my heart was falling farther away from God. And I was being attracted to some of these people that were laughing at my jokes. And coincidentally, it was some of Pam's friends, some of her girlfriends. And so she approached me and told me I better back off. Well, I didn't think I needed to, because I felt like I had it under control.
Yeah. And Pam, what was going through kind of your mind, your heart at this time, that maybe he wasn't getting across to him?
Yeah. I had tried to talk to him several times about it, and he would get upset with me and say I was jealous, and that there was nothing going on, that He come home to me every night and brought his paycheck home. But at the church, I'd had some of the elders of the church even come to me and say, we've noticed some things. Do we need to, take a handle on this? And I said, no, I think I can handle it. And I couldn't. It just kept building and building, and until it just made a mess.
Yeah. Did you fear? Were you at a point where you were like fearing for your marriage, or was it just like, okay, this is an issue we've got to deal with, but you didn't really anticipate?
Yes, I feared for my marriage because I could see Mike getting deeper and deeper into a relationship that shouldn't have been, and when I couldn't talk to him about it, and our communication just totally fell apart because of the friction between us.
Yeah.
And I just realized that I couldn't live that way. It wasn't fair bringing the children up that way, and we had to do something to make a difference because it wasn't working.
What about you, Mike? Did you see it for what it was? Was it as big to you as it was, you think, to Pam? Was divorce in your mind? Was it like, oh my gosh, this is getting bad? Or is this like, this woman's crazy and I'm, whatever,
I did not see it as being as serious as what it was to her.
Right.
I felt like everything was under control, that I could handle it, and I did see to some degree that I was being attracted to these other things, but I thought it was just part of enjoying life and going with the flow of things. And I thought everything would work itself out, and so I didn't do anything about it. I just hoped that she would come around and see my point of view, so to speak.
Yeah, she did not.
She did
not see your point of view. So there was a boiling point. And what was that, Pam? Why don't you tell us a little bit about what happened that kind of...
I had taken just to where I didn't feel like I could take anymore. And so I went home and I unloaded all of Mike's belongings, his clothing, his hunting gear, his music, and I set it on the back porch. I changed the locks and was scared to death for him to come home. But when he did, he tried the door and it didn't open. And he knocked and I come to the door and asked me what was going on. I said, well, until you can get a hold of this thing and change it, then we can't do this anymore.
Yeah, and you were not giving up on your marriage at that point.
No.
Yeah, you were trying to give him a wake-up call.
Yes, just hoping that it would be a wake-up call and that he would really finally see how serious I was, that there had to be a change.
Yeah. So, Mike, what were you thinking when you came home and saw all this?
I remember pulling up in the driveway and seeing all the things on the back porch, and it upset me that she had taken this serious step. I thought, man, I didn't think it was this serious. We did speak a few minutes at the back door and about the locks being changed and those kinds of things, and she basically said, until you can be that man that I married, you're not welcome here. And so I loaded up my stuff and I left.
Wow. And so you left and you went and lived somewhere else, obviously.
Yeah, the church allowed me to stay in a parsonage area for a short period of time and tried talking to me about some things. And when they seen that I wasn't going to change my way of living and my way of thinking, that I was, they graciously said that I needed to move on to another place to live. So I did. I found another place to live and resided there for a period of time. And still close to the area. I didn't move out of the area. I stayed local.
Was there, in your mind, was there any thought of like reconciliation of just kind of, okay, this is kind of like what she was thinking, like, okay, this is going to be a wake-up call and we'll get back together. Was there any thought of that at all?
Yeah, I thought it would be temporary, that things are still going to smooth over and put a Band-Aid on it and go on. And I thought that she would come around to my way of thinking, that I could still have all of my friends and do all the fun stuff in life and have her friends too as my friends and still work it out. But it didn't work out that way.
Yeah. So it wasn't temporary. At what point did you guys realize this is going to end in divorce?
I had never worked. Mike had always wanted me to stay home with the kids and keep house. So when it come the bills to be paid, it wasn't happening like it should. So I had talked to a lawyer and said, no divorce. I just want security that my bills will be paid and the kids and I will have a place to live. But then when Mike contacted a lawyer, he can tell that, but it was totally different with.
My attorney said that the legal separation that she had filed for, yes, I had to continue paying all of her bills, and now my new place of residence had to be paid for, and he said, you've locked into child support and everything. He said, you're basically divorced, but you're just still legally tied together. He says, you might as well just file for a divorce and get that over with. And then he says, then you can get out of some of those payments you're making. You don't have to pay for 2 houses that way. And so we did. When he told me that, I filed for divorce, and just a few months later, we were divorced. And that was about a year after our separation. So that separation lasted for about a year, and we were divorced.
Wow. So from that divorce, what was going on in your life, outwardly and inwardly, during that divorce, Pam?
I was really angry and then really bitter with Mike. So I caught the attention of some guys. I got married after about, I think it was 6 months. I didn't wait very long. I was just so angry with Mike, I thought, if he's going to run around and do this, then, I'm not stand by myself either. Yeah. So I remarried, and I was married for about 5.5 years. I was treated well. It was not that. I don't think I ever got over, my grandfather was a pastor, and I was raised that was wrong. Yeah. So that never left my heart. From the first night I was married, the second time, I cried. I mean, I would just cry and cry because I felt like I had went against the things that I knew.
Right.
And it was a long 6.5 years.
Yeah. Wow. So you grew up in a Christian home.
Yes.
And so now you've gone through one divorce, didn't probably know how to respond to it really. Wasn't in your plans at all, right?
Wasn't in my plans, no.
And then a second, and obviously that takes its weight on you, and it just starts to pile up a little bit. Mike, what was going on in your life? I mean, were you kind of moving on? What were you doing at that time?
At that point, of course, obviously, I had stepped down from the platform at church, was no longer doing ministry of any kind. Attended church briefly, periodically, just to keep that social tie to some of my friends, but I buried myself in work and just become a workaholic, and tried to keep myself occupied. And I was granted visitation rights with my children during that time, and I tried to go and visit them on a regular basis. But when I would go visit with them, they didn't want anything to do with me, and I couldn't understand that at the beginning, but. You see, I had been raising them to be a Christ follower, yeah, and to do things morally right, spiritually right. And so when I strayed from walking with the Lord the way that I should, quit my Bible reading and my praying, and living a good life and setting an example for them, they no longer wanted to be a part of me or be influenced by me, because I wasn't living what I had told them they needed to live. Yeah. And so it created conflict with my children. And so during those...
Distrust.
Yes.
Distrust, yeah.
A lot of distrust. And so in my visitations with them, a lot of times they would go to the bedroom and shut the door and wouldn't even visit with me. And there was times I would take Christmas presents or birthday presents, and they wouldn't even open them and didn't want them.
Yeah. Wow. So that was 10 years, am I right? So y'all were married for first time?
About 14 years.
14 years. And then 10 years you were divorced.
Almost 10 years.
Almost 10 years. How in the world do you go from what you guys just explained to us? What seed came that ultimately led you guys back together? What happened? What do you start, with something like this?
Well, it started, I was actually very discouraged and depressed with life. My children didn't want anything to do with me. My marriage had failed. And a lot of my friendships had dwindled because a lot of my friends didn't really know how to react with me because I wasn't the same guy that I used to be. I wasn't a bad guy. I didn't do drugs. I didn't drink. And I didn't smoke. And I didn't do a lot of the running around as far as the drug scene. I didn't do any of that. But I just wasn't that church-going guy, Christ follower that I should have been. And so I made it a point to move and relocate. I was going to move to Colorado, and I had bought a horse in Colorado, had it boarded. I purchased a piece of property out there, put a down payment on that property, and I secured a construction job. And so in preparations of getting ready to move, I went back to a little country church that Pam and I had been youth ministers in years ago. I wanted to visit that church and basically say goodbye to some of my friends. But I remember that Sunday morning the pastor preached. I can't even remember what he preached about. But at the end of the sermon, I remember he opened the altar for prayer. And I had a yearning and a longing to go pray.
Yeah.
So I walked down the aisle, and after I got through praying, I cried for a long time. But when I got up, I looked around, and the pastor was the only one in the church. I don't know how long I had been there, probably a couple hours praying at the altar. Everybody else had went home. They dismissed church and went home. So, but I felt a change in my heart, really even a greater change than the first time that I ever prayed. I remember that time well too, but this was something different. There was a special communication with the Lord at the altar that day. I went home, and my life was changed. I had a different outlook. I thought that this new move to Colorado was going to be a fresh start on life.
Yeah.
New happiness, new adventures, a new walk with the Lord. And so I was looking forward to that trip to Colorado, riding my horse on a piece of property and hunting and fishing and going to a new church. I had actually located a new church there that I was going to start going to. And on Wednesday night, before I was to fly out on Saturday, Wednesday night, the boarding stable called and my horse had died.
Wow.
And but they said, we have another one for you to look at when you get here. On Thursday night, the next night, the real estate agent called and said that my property had been ran through the title company, and they found a first right offer that years ago somebody had put some money down on the property and claimed that they wanted the first right to purchase this property.
It's the first time I'm hearing this part of the story.
And so this is the first time you've heard this part.
Yeah.
And so this is the series of miracles that took place. So they told me that they had to honor that first right offer on the property, and they sent my down payment back to me.
Yeah.
They
Did
said,
you sense the Lord working at this point?
Not
or
yet.
You hadn't
Not
put
yet.
it together yet?
So on Friday night, now remember, I'm supposed to fly out on Saturday morning. Friday night, the construction company calls me and says there's a bonding issue, some legal statistics that didn't get met. We cannot start that project next week. We don't need you for a few months yet. So Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, I got shot down on my reasons to go to Colorado. I called the airplane company, and my airplane ticket was non-refundable, so I lost that money. And I went to bed Friday night very disgusted, depressed again, and I thought my life was in order. I thought things were going to start working out. So Saturday morning, I wake up to the sound of an airplane going overhead, and immediately Satan spoke to my heart, and he said, "There goes your airplane. Where is that God that you prayed to 2 weeks ago at that little country altar? Where's he at now?"
Right.
And immediately my phone rang. And I picked it up and I said, hello. And it was my daughter that I hadn't talked to in almost 10 years.
Wow. How old is she at this point?
She was in her early 20s. And she said, Dad, this is Amanda. And I recognized her voice. So I said, I sat up and I said, are you okay? And her voice was trembling and I could tell she'd been crying. And I said, are you okay? And she said, yes. And I said, is Mom okay? And she said, Mom's okay. Well, immediately I thought about my son. I said, is Mark okay? And she said, Dad, everybody's fine. She said, I need to talk to you. And I said, okay. She said, can I come see you? And I said, absolutely. She said, okay. She said, I'll be there in about 30 minutes. I said, okay. So we hung up the phone, and I remember sitting on the edge of the bed, and I thought, man, what in the world's going on? Immediately, my phone rang again, immediately. And she said, Dad, where do you live? And I said, about 1.5 miles from you. And I gave her directions, and so she came, knocked on the door. And
She'd never been to your house before.
she'd never been to my house before. And so we talked and made small talk about current events. I had a grandchild that had been born during those years that I had never seen yet. And so we talked and made some small talk. And then, so we both sat up on the edge of the couch. And she said, well, Dad, the reason I'm here, is there a chance that you and Mom could ever get the family back together? And it took me by surprise, Cameron.
I imagine. Yes.
And I said, well, sis, I said, first of all, there's a lot of water under the bridge.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm in the process of moving to Colorado. And the Lord spoke to my heart right then, and he said, no, you're not. and I said, besides that, I said, Mom's, got somebody in her life now. And I said, Mom's going on with life. And she looked at me and she said, Dad, you don't know what's going on, do you? And I says, no, what's going on? And she proceeded to tell me that, she said, well, Mom's unhappy. And she says, there's some things going on in Mom's life. And she says, Mom's actually going to be getting a divorce from the guy that she's with. And she said, if there's ever a time that you think that things could have worked out, she said, this might be the time you think about getting things back together with Mom.